Paula. What can you tell us about the special education process?
The special education process is long and legal because an individualized educational plan is a legal document. I've read over some of the questions that you have submitted, and I'll do my best to answer most of them, but I want to give you a brief overview about special education first. In the state of Missouri, children can be considered early childhood special education from the ages of 0 to 3. This would not be typical, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And I think Dr. Moore has the first steps document that you may want to review because it specifically addresses early childhood special ed. But let's talk just a minute about special education. Special education is designed to assist children with the educational process who have a disability. That being said, let me get on my soapbox for just a short minute. When we're talking about children in special education, I want you to have the philosophical view that we are talking about children first and disability second. So when we're talking about a child who is blind, we're not speaking about a blind child. When we're speaking about a child who is hard of hearing or a child who has an intellectual disability, it's the child first and the disability second. If you'll keep that in mind when you're working with parents and children of all ages, you'll have a whole different mental outlook when dealing with children and their families. So what is an IEP? An IEP stands for Individual Educational Plan, and that is exactly what it is. There are no hidden meanings. It is a plan designed for a very specific child with a specific disability. The educational plan, once it is signed, becomes a legal document. And so everything within that educational plan, it is the responsibility of the school district or Head Start or any other agency to enforce the IEP. And that was one of the questions that you asked. Who is ultimately responsible for the services? The answer to that is who is ever your director of your facility. For me, the principal is the first line. They are responsible for seeing that I oversee the IEP correctly. If the principal doesn't do the job, then it would go to the superintendent and then to the board of directors, and then ultimately, if there is a complaint, that would be filed at the state level. In this case, the state of Missouri. So those are all compliance issues. So let's just say that you have a child who is supposed to have speech services 30 minutes every week. If that child does not receive speech services 30 minutes each week, then that individualized educational plan is illegal and out of compliance, and it's someone's job to see that that child receives those services. Another question that you ask is who sits on the IEP team? And that's very easy to answer because that is also dictated by the law. The parents or legal guardian are required to sit on the IEP team. A regular education teacher, now in the course of early childhood, that may be a Head Start educator, it might be a speech therapist. It's got to be someone who understands the educational process, then a special education teacher, and then very often there is just someone else who sits on either by invitation of the parent or by invitation of Head Start. In early childhood special education, very often it's difficult and hard to find a regular education teacher. So we usually would fall back to you, the Head Start teacher. So that answers that question. All of those people then are directly involved in the IEP process, and that's one of the questions that you ask. Now, before you can get to the IEP process, you have to have an evaluation, and that evaluation is the result of a referral. Who makes the referral? Anybody can. It can be the teacher, it can be a therapist, it can be a parent. And in the instance of early childhood special education, most generally it will be the parent. You might see a medical practitioner who noticed that there was some type of suspected medical disability who might also make a referral to the IEP team. And then a full-scale evaluation would have to be done. And that is the expense of the educational system, whether that's Head Start, whether that's a public school, but the parent is not responsible for paying for that evaluation. So I hope that answers that question. The referral process then is when there is a suspected disability. Now, let me say this briefly. In early childhood special education, and when working with children in all aspects of early childhood education, there is a huge difference between a delay and a disability. And the way I explain that is this way. A delay simply means you're late and you can get caught up. So if you're late to work 3 days in a row, what you're going to have to do is set your alarm clock a little bit earlier, get up and move a little faster. But eventually, one would hope, you would get to your job on time. That would not be the case with a disability. A child who has a disability will always have that disability. Does that mean that they can't learn to cope, that they can't adjust, that things can't be modified? Absolutely not. They can be modified, they can be accommodated, and the child can learn to cope, but that disability will always be with them. So we need to understand that just because you may have some children who are behind, some children who do not pick up things as quickly as the quote average child, whatever that is, does not mean that that child has a disability. So very often in early childhood education, we use the term delay because we are hoping to see that with services like Head Start, that child will catch up. And by the time they get to kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they are no longer delayed, but they are achieving or learning in a timely manner. Okay? Now, someone asked, are there different types of IEPs? No. An individualized educational plan is an individualized educational plan. Do they all look alike? Absolutely not. Because each IEP is highly individualized for that child. So every IEP in the state of Missouri will be done on the state of Missouri forms, and they will be developed according to the law. If they're not, then that IEP is not valid. You can look at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education website, go then to special education, and there's a section under compliance, and those are the laws for the state of Missouri plan. The state of Missouri plan has to be approved by the federal government, and so if that plan is followed that the state of Missouri has set up, then you know that that individualized educational plan is a legal document and is enforceable. Thank you so much for listening.